So welcome everybody to our Asian Supervisor Network meeting. We meet once a month and we have been meeting for a couple of years now. And our goal is to bring visibility of coaching supervision to Asia. So most of the participants attending are from Asia, but everybody is welcome. We have participants from all over the world joining us. As you can see, Kathleen, we have people from India, Indonesia, South Korea, the United States, Canada, Uruguay, France. You know, for them it's really early in the morning. So I think we're covering the whole world, Vietnam. And where are you today? Kathleen, are you in California?
I'm actually in Colorado right now. Okay. So it's 8 o'clock my time and very happy to be here.
Great. So I want to welcome all of the guests and particularly to Kathleen Stinnett, who is going to be our presenter today. She's one of the first coaching supervisors in the Americas. So you are really pioneer. And Kathleen is also an MCC, Master Certified Coach. And what would you like people to know about you?
Well, I actually would love to know a little bit about folks, and I'll also share about my background and just hit some highlights. So, Damien, is it okay that I share my slides and we just
you can share your slides? And
excellent. So here, let me just share a little bit about what I hope that we will cover tonight. And I really want this to be flexible and I want this to be a conversation. And so I really welcome your questions, your wonderings, your curiosities. I'm thrilled to be here talking about supervision with the Enneagram as a lens, but I really would love to know what you would also like to get out of this. So Enneagram is a way to describe personality. So I think we should start with just to really look at what is personality and our habits, and then look at the Enneagram as a language. And then I'll talk about how I have used the Enneagram in coaching supervision. So please, let's have this be a really active, interactive participation. And please use chat. And Damien, if you can help, manage chat. And if lots of questions are coming in, I'm not noticing them, just grab my attention if you don't mind. But I would love to people put into chat your answers to any part of those questions. And if you can type them all in one paragraph, they'll stay together before you hit enter. But I'd love to know where you are in the world. And Damien's done a great job of letting me know that. Are you a coaching supervisor or a coach at this moment in time? And I know that if you're a coaching supervisor, you may also be a coach. So you can put both of those. What is your current familiarity with Enneagram on a 1 to 10 scale, with 1 being low, 10 being high? And how do you use the Enneagram now, if at all? And what brings you here? Why are you awake at 4 in the morning, Michelle, and participating at 10 at night, Michael, and all the other time zones in between? So what brings you here? I'd really love to get a few snapshots of you, and then I'll talk a little bit about myself, and then we'll keep going. It's lovely to see all of your faces. Thank you, Peter, for jumping in, and Larissa, nice to see you here. I love it. I'm curious about everything. That gives us a lot of leeway. All right. So I'll answer very quickly the question about how is Enneagram different from MBTI as I know it. I'm familiar with MBTI, but certainly would not say I'm an expert at it. MBTI talks about our internal preferences for thinking and processing data and being in the world. And there's very little overlap between MBTI and Enneagram. Some people have tried to find correlations and no one has really done a good job of that. So they seem to be pretty separate constructs. And thanks for all of you weighing in. Great. How to apply this to supervision, super helpful. Yeah, and for those of you, there's probably about 8 or 9 of you with us today that took advantage of the complimentary assessment that Damien offered. And so if you didn't have a chance yet, that's available to anyone who would like to take the assessment that I am offering, which is from the Integrative Enneagram Solutions Group. And I'll talk a little bit about that assessment. There are many out there on the market. this is probably the most accurate and highly valid. So that's why I use that. All right, thank you. Fantastic. All right, I think I've got a really good sense of where we're starting. It doesn't look like anyone is the world's expert on Enneagram, so that makes me a little bit more comfortable. I'm a little less nervous now. All right, and thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, so here's a little bit about my background. I trained at the Hudson Institute of Coaching in 1999, and I served on the faculty of the Hudson Institute for about 17 years. And I've been an MCC since 2005 as part of the journey to make sure the faculty of the Hudson Institute were accredited. I did my supervision training with Eric DeHaan from the Ashridge University. And the Enneagram, I think I bumped into early, probably in 2000, and I didn't want to have anything to do with this because a woman who is a very dear friend of mine literally couldn't get through a sentence without saying the Enneagram this, and you're a type this, and I'm a type this, and you must be a type this. And I thought, I want nothing to do with this thing. And several years later, the faculty of the Hudson Institute invited someone to come to a leadership team meeting we had and introduced us again to the Enneagram. And I thought there was a lot more to the tool and the construct than I imagined. And then I had a chance to work with Helen Palmer, who is a psychologist and put a lot of deep roots into her thinking about the Enneagram and her publishing it. And somewhere around 2010 and beyond, I started using it as a tool for my own self-awareness and discovery, and I got hooked. For me, and I've come from the world of consulting and training and development and performance management and all those other things. I am trained on a lot of different instruments, and this is probably the single most powerful construct that I have personally had in terms of my own self-awareness and self-development. And I keep learning. So I'm on the journey of working with the Enneagram, and I honestly can't imagine coaching someone or even doing great supervision without it. Now, I do realize that hampers me because I'm saying, gosh, this is so powerful that I really want to use it. And in fact, I use it in all of my coaching engagements, and I do a lot of intact team development. And I invite my teams to also take the Enneagram so that we can have shared language and understanding about our drivers. I found this particular instrument in 2015, and I thought it was so powerful. The group, the Integrative Enneagram, comes from South Africa, and they weren't having a lot of training in the United States, which is where I live. And so I said, gosh, I know all these coaches, let me help you bring it more fully to the United States. There are a lot of coaches who could benefit. So beginning in 2017, I started working with them to train coaches to use this assessment. So that's a little bit about my background. When COVID hit and almost all of my on-the-road team building and leadership development activities came to a screeching halt because I was on the road every week, I thought this is a perfect chance for me to marry two things together. One is group coaching supervision, and one is the Enneagram. And so I invited people who were interested to join me. And I am currently running 5 groups of 5 to 6 coaching practitioners in my group coaching supervision. They all know the Enneagram. And so a little bit later, I'll talk about how we use the Enneagram in our supervision work. So just checking in with chats, Damien, anything for me to know if there's something that's come in? I haven't been paying close attention there.
People are just sharing where they are calling from and answering the questions about their experience and what they expect, but there is not any particular question.
Great, thank you so much. So what I'd like to do is do a little splash about Enneagram, talk about personality, have you kind of touch it a little bit. I'll describe the 9 types because that's essentially what Enneagram stands for. The Greek root of the word Enneagram is Ennea, stands for 9, and gram is something that is written or drawn. So we have 9 different personality types. And I love this quote from Mary Bast because this really essentially sums up how I think about the Enneagram, which is it portrays, I'm going to grab the second paragraph, the strength and limitations of our inner habits of attention and response. And so this talks a lot about my stance to the world, how I see the world, which then becomes habituated. And so that's a little bit about what the Enneagram is describing. Every one of the 9 types has strengths and shadow sides. And so when we look at the world through the lens of Enneagram, I think it kind of gives us a lot of language and understanding very quickly. So sometimes people say, where does this come from? And of course, we would say, where does personality come from? This is a way to describe personality. We understand today that a lot of personality is formed by nature, what I'm genetically wired with. I come into the world with a certain tendency toward extroversion or introversion, pessimism or optimism. I get wired through my parents and my genes. And then we run into our social upbringing. And of course, that's the nurture part of our personality. And what is interesting is I often invite my coaching supervision groups to share their personal histories. And I will let you know the questions that make up those personal histories. But one of them is, what were the unique challenges of being a child? How did you grow up? What shaped you? And very quickly, we can hear, I think, the early threads of our personality through the lens of the Enneagram. And I'll say a little bit more about that. For a moment, I would like you to do an experiment with me. And if you want to write this down, great. If you want to just think about it, that is fine too. This is just for you. So please don't put this in chat. This is for you. I want you to think about you as a coach or a coaching supervisor and simply answer these questions. What do you know to be true about you? I am. And you might have words like caring, responsible, funny, fastidious, right? Whatever is true for you, what are you? And what do you know about yourself that you are equally not? I am not detail-oriented, or I'm not judgmental, or I'm not rude or angry or uncaring. So just take a moment and think about or write down a few descriptions on either side of this equation. And my next question, I would love for you to take yourself off mute and actually answer the question, how do you know? How do you know you are those things that you said you are? And how do you know that you're not those things that you said you were not? How do you know? And Alex, I see a big grinning smile there. I don't know if you have an early thought you'd like to share.
I like the question as it is. We just, that wrote down all the things that we think we are and we think we are not. And how do you know? I'm like, oops. And I think this is actually my wish list. This can be my wish list, or this can be actually projection from the others on me.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you, Alex. And Sunny?
Feedback.
Feedback.
From others.
Okay, feedback from others. So I can see myself through the lens of others. That's interesting. How else do we know these things?
Hi,
yeah,
Kathleen.
Hi.
Yeah. It's thank you for your session. And it's, for me, it was listening to what gives me energy and what makes me feel alive when I was answering what I am, what I'm passionate about. So I can feel it in my body, and I know that my energy goes towards it. And when I was reflecting on what I am not, I was again listening to what makes me cringe or is hard work. So
that's beautiful. So that it's what you're pulled toward or what you're kind of repulsed by. Thank you. That's fantastic. Any other wonderings about how you know this about yourself?
I think like Janine, it's my emotion, not just my, hey Janine, as well as my energy, it's my emotional reactions, so I know when my values are crossed. I know when I feel happy that I've had success with a client or whatever else. So it's my emotional reactions.
And I hear in there too, it's like the alignment of perhaps my behaviors with my values. So those things I feel more certain about, perhaps. Yeah, thank you. Any other comments?
For me,
Yeah.
by checking my emotions, checking my emotion. When I write down these, in the side of I am, I'm thinking that what characteristic is this is reach my desired feelings.
Yeah, thank you for that. So here's my second thought-provoking question, I hope, is what if you were also the opposite of those things? And so just to do a thought experiment with yourself, every word on your list of I am, I want you to think of an example when you were not that. So if I say I'm caring, can I think of an example where I haven't been caring? And if I say I'm not detail focused, can I think of an example where I was very detail focused? And so just do a little thinking of every single phrase you wrote down on both sides of the column. Can you also find the opposite of that? And if you can, what does that mean?
This is our tendency, our willingness, and our shadow as well.
Yeah, our tendency. That's a really good first phrase that you use, Stephanie. Thank you. How does anyone else think about that? Okay, that might take us more energy or effort to do what is not our tendency or our pattern. Any other thoughts?
Sometimes I do it, but it's not, it's out of alignment. So I can feel in my body that it isn't like, it's like, this is not me. This is not right for me.
Okay, it's not right for me, or it's out of alignment. So Barbara, would it be fair to say it's not my usual habit? It's not my usual pattern of behaving?
Yes. And I would say it also might not align with my values.
Okay.
So I'm looking at a couple of them, and it's like when I'm not kind, it doesn't align with my values.
Yeah, thank you for that. So a couple of you have referenced values as a way to help align my behaviors, right? So now I want to take this just a step further or a little broader to say, what do you believe personality to be? And thank you, Peter, for your note. It's difficult to find what I am when so much of what I am also not. Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma there. So what is personality? How would you define personality? And if you could put that in chat, or if it's easier to speak, that's also good. But I'd love to know what you think of as personality. And again, Enneagram is defining 9 different and distinct personality types. Okay, Bruce, a limiting belief about who you are. An aggregation of traits, thank you. My lifestyle, recurring tendencies. Anything else that you think about when you think about personality? Preferences and patterns, thanks, Larissa. Core beliefs and values, preferences, mindset, response, the way I usually show up, behaviors, emotions, etc. Yeah, these are all great ways to look at and think about personality. When I think about personality, thank you, Daniela, characteristics and behaviors, I think about it being a highly adaptive set of coping strategies that we have learned over time. Again, the wiring plus a socialization, nature plus nurture. So we put together from a very early stage these very complex coping strategies so that I can be safe in the world and get positive attention and stay out of negative attention and get connection and love and stay out of harm's way. And you can imagine I'm trying to accomplish a lot of those things as a kiddo and then again as an adult. And so these strategies work well for us. And when they work well, we repeat them. And when we repeat them, they all of a sudden become our patterns of behavior, our habits, our inner habits of attention and response, as Mary Bast would say. And I appreciate all the additional comments on what you think personality is. So that's what personality is. It is malleable, it is changeable, but by the time I've reached adulthood, it's really locked in. And so I like to use the Enneagram as a way to describe different personality traits. And what the Enneagram does best is it describes our deepest driving motivations, not necessarily our behaviors. So, I've got this example here. Someone could be in a meeting or in a setting with many people, and they decide to take over the meeting. They start directing and controlling the agenda and saying, guys, we're off track. We only have 10 more minutes. We need to make sure we're focused. Alex, you've been talking too much. We haven't heard yet from Tim. And so all of a sudden someone can take over the meeting. That's behavior. Why might they do that? Why might someone take over a meeting and start directing and controlling the agenda? And you can put that in chat. And let's see how many different versions we could get around why someone would take over a meeting. And feel free to speak at that. Yeah, someone might feel responsible for the outcomes. Thanks, Damien, because they're an 8. Okay, Michael. They're goal-oriented. They've got a desire to move things forward. Yeah, nothing has been accomplished so far. There's a million reasons. Motivation, drive, traits. Thank you. Yeah, different reasons. Maybe it's out of ego. I want to look good. Maybe it's out of fear. If we don't get something done, they're a control freak. So here is where the Enneagram comes in and the 9 different types. And what we can sometimes see is we can behave in one way, but why we behave in a one way can sometimes be explained through looking at it through the lens of the Enneagram. And so just to pull a few numbers out of this wheel, and by the way, the language of the Enneagram has been represented differently by many, many different authors and publishers. So the Enneagram sits in the public domain. No one owns it. This representation of the words comes from the Integrative Enneagram Solutions Group out of South Africa, who has probably the most valid, accurate assessment out there. So I use their model to talk about the Enneagram. But an active controller, type 8, might take over the meeting because she feels like it's chaotic. Yeah, Michael, are you an 8? No, you're a 5. You put your type in parentheses. Thanks for that. Someone might take over the meeting because there was a planned agenda. Maybe this is the type 1. There was a planned agenda and there was structure and there was timing assigned. And so we need to follow that planned agenda and structure so that we can honor the guidelines that we set for ourselves. Somebody else might take over the meeting if they're a 3 competitive achiever because we got to get something done and we're not being effective or we're not being efficient. And so Enneagram explains why we might do what we do. Because it's describing motivation, not behavior, we cannot predict someone's Enneagram by looking at a behavior, all right? And so I want you to think about, and Damien's got a quick poll. There are 9 choices in the poll. They do not line up with the 9 Enneagram types. So don't try to match the poll choices with the 9 types. I intentionally did not do that. But I do want you to think about when you are coaching or supervising groups, what are some of your primary drivers or motivators? Because our behaviors are going to look a lot alike. As coaches or supervisors, we're trained to listen. We're trained to ask good questions. We're trained to give empathy. We're trained to build trust. So those are all behaviors, right? But why am I doing what I'm doing when I'm coaching or supervising? What's driving me? And so if you can, Damien, would love to have people participate in the poll. And I'd say be honest with yourself. So we can just have some fun here to say, what are the big reasons that we are coaching? What really is going on for us? And the question is, what primarily drives you? And there are 9 choices, so scroll down. If there was one thing that is really driving you when you are coaching, what might it be? Because we're going to see a lot of similar behaviors, especially if you've gone through an accredited training program. We're following a lot of competencies that have been defined by one of our organizing bodies. This is fascinating. I'll give you a few more seconds. I know there's a lot of choices. And by the way, I've just put this poll together. I didn't know if we would have a really tight distribution or a very broad distribution. So I'm kind of tickled with what is here. And
25, we had 25 or 27, so well, 26 of 27, so there is only one person missing. So should I end the poll?
Yeah, please do, Damien, and go ahead and let's look at the results together. So as we're looking at the results, I mean, we see a wide smattering across 7 of the 9 choices. No one said my primary motivation is to follow a coaching process and guidelines, because honestly, that's not very inspiring, is it? And no one said being successful, hopefully to get to the next coaching referral. So the good news is we're all focused on the here and now and creating something with the client. And I would suggest that there are some of those phrases that don't resonate much with you at all, and there are others that really did. And I'm sure if we gave you 2 or 3 choices, we'd get kind of a broader distribution. But sometimes, you know, people say, gosh, I want to really create possibilities for clients. And I would say, oh, that person might be a type 7 enthusiastic visionary. Sometimes people say, I really want, I'll do anything I can to help the client. I'm here to help the client. I feel thwarted when I can't help the client. And maybe that would be a type 2, considerate helper, right? And so I'm not suggesting that there's a perfect marriage here, but when we are motivated by something, it is going to show up in how I view the world and how I view my clients and what I do then, my behaviors, my thinking, feeling, and acting. So let me pause here. I'm talking a lot, but what questions or thoughts do you have so far? And I'm going to go ahead and share the primary motivators that are attached to the 9 Enneagram types. Any questions or wondering so far?
I would hazard that it's easier to fall into a relationship with a client who shares the same Enneagram type or a wing in terms of connecting with them easily.
Well, it's interesting, Michael. I'm curious if you have any knowledge or experience of this. Is that what you are finding?
Yes, I mean, you know, there's a fair number of 3s out there. 9s are always tough to read. They're the hardest, I think, of all. But yeah, I would say, you know, especially in executive coaching, there's a lot of people resonating with three, 8s and 1s.
So you're saying, it's not that you're saying I have more resonance with certain clients who might share my type. It's just you're finding that certain types are more likely to show up for coaching.
Yes. And
Okay.
I find the ones that I make very quick progress with are the ones that are aligned with my Enneagram type, because we're just simpatico right
Yeah,
away.
interesting. Yeah, thanks for that, Michael. So I'll talk a little bit about that. What's interesting in this particular database, again, the Integrative Enneagram, it's 100-some thousand leaders across the globe. It's a very globally distributed set of data. Most of the people in the data set are coming from corporate settings. Of course, nonprofit and government are also represented in there, but it's not a wide distribution of the world at large. We don't have a lot of artists in here or firefighters. So a lot of these people are in corporate settings. The most common profiles for leaders are 3, 7, and 8. Okay, that's the most common profile for leaders. It doesn't mean you can't be a social 2 and not be a CEO. I know a lot of CEOs and C-suite leaders who are social 2s, very ambitious, 2s that want to make a difference in a group setting. The least represented of the types in corporate settings are the type 4s, and slightly behind them, the type 6s. And I could show you a distribution, and I might send you into a breakout in a minute, and I'll have a chance to show the distribution and the gender split among the types. But it is, yeah, it is very common for some people to say, I resonate more with people that share my type and my tri-type, and I'll explain that in just a minute. Was there another comment? Yeah, Sunny.
Yeah.
And you're on mute.
I have a feeling you're about to explain this, but I cannot say I'm anything on this wheel. I mean, you know, I don't think they're mutually exclusive, I guess is what I'm saying. I could not say I'm an 8 or I'm a 7. I couldn't say that.
And thank you for saying that. We are all of these things. We're all of these things. And what I get excited about in terms of this construct is if I can see my habit of attention keeps repeating this one thing, I want to be helpful, I want to be helpful, I want to be helpful, then I can start recognizing, when do I say, yes, I'll help, when I actually really don't want to? And then all of a sudden the whole world is at my possibility. So we have these habits, we have these patterns, which is personality, which work for us most of the time. And as soon as I recognize my response is based on the habit and not my choice, now I get to be in choice about what's happening, if that makes sense. Sunny, did that speak to you at all? Because I definitely hear you. And many people say, I'm not just one thing, which is true. We're not.
I just guess I don't see one dominant habit there for me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, you probably have a wide suite of possible choices. Yeah, and I may not pronounce your name correctly. Is it Sraban?
Yeah.
Sraban?
My point is, for when I'm thinking of the coaching, I think it keeps on changing depending on the client. Some places is a storyteller, then I have to do something. Somebody is coming, is very authentic, then I have to be very authentic, because it is not a standard type I display in each coaching clients.
And I don't know that I understood your point perfectly. Are you saying that our clients all show up very differently, and as long as they're authentic, we can meet them in that place?
Yeah, exactly. If somebody is making a storyteller, then I have to do something. I have to be in control and be strong. If somebody looking for a safe place to do or to wanted to feel protected, then I have to be in the first 6.
So
somebody is looking
flexible.
hungry for the appreciation, then I have to be too.
Okay. And so you are talking about your broad repertoire of how you meet your clients based on how you perceive their needs.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. That's lovely. Sim Chu.
Yeah, thank you. I showed up as a tool, and it actually got me to think, and I noticed a pattern. And perhaps the pattern was in line with how I wanted to be feeling appreciated my own family members. And then I realized, oh, it's not about them, it's about what's about me. And that really shifted my thinking and behavior. And I become much more aware of that tendency. And it was quite life-changing for me over the weekend when I did this assessment. That, you know, and because of what's happening, you know, as the children grow up, become adults, and then you just have to change. The children, you are adults already, you got to let go. So that was something that really, it really gave me the awareness. Thank you.
Thank you, Sim Chu. And I appreciate what you're saying. All of these personality types have their brilliant strengths, and they all have a little shadow side. And one of the, I think, painful things that I hear people that identify with the type 2 say is, I didn't realize that I was helping so that people would like me or appreciate me. And now I see it, and now I get to be in choice. So one of the things I like doing with the Enneagram is coaching people. One of the kind of practices I coach type 2s around is to look at where they can genuinely and generously say yes with no strings attached. You know, that's the yes that you want to say, right? I want to do this, even if you don't know that it was me doing it. If I never get thanks, if I can say yes there, that's a really lovely yes to say. Yeah, thank you. And CN, I can see myself being different in different situations. I wonder if one can be typecast. Of course, you know, that's why it's motivation, not behavior. I'm going to behave differently in lots of situations. But if I peel back the layers, it might be that I have similar motivations. So let me jump to, and I may come back to that. I'm going to jump to how I think about the Enneagram. Is it gives us multiple levels and lenses to look at through a shared language. So when people are familiar with these 9 patterns of behaviors and the motivational drivers, we can bring this into coaching, or how I use it in coaching supervision, because if I know my client's Enneagram type, we can say, gosh, how is that showing up or manifesting in their world? How is it helping them? How is it getting in their way? If I, as a supervisor, then can look at what is the coach's Enneagram, what are their primary drivers, as they work with a client, we get more information. If I'm self-aware, I know that my motivational drivers are also playing out in the supervision. And then we can look at the dance between group members. So I'll give you a little story. I have a type 7 coach in a supervision group. She's great at thinking big picture and what's possible and what's out there in the future. And because all of our supervision group members know the Enneagram and know this construct, and they've chosen to work with me because of this, they will describe their cases with the Enneagram construct. So here's my type 7 coach saying, I'm super frustrated, sorry, Michael, with my type 5 client, right? Who is so detail oriented and into the details. And I just want him to dream this big dream. And I want him to think about what's possible. And he's mired into, he hates his job and he hates his boss. And I just want him to say, but what's possible? And what can you look toward? And so here's the Enneagram playing out beautifully. Now, I can look at all the group members, because some of the group members, depending on their Enneagram type, will start offering perspective from their point of view, which can be very helpful and also a little limiting because they're coming at it through their lens, their habituated response. And of course, then I have to look at my own Enneagram type and how it plays out. So one of the things I said earlier is you cannot guess somebody's type by their behaviors. I want you to do that right now, though. Could you please guess what type I might be? And I'm going to go back to the slide that has all 9 types, and hopefully you can read the descriptions. What type is Kathleen? You have seen me behaving for 41 minutes. And you can just put it in chat. Any guesses? Thank you, Simchu. A 4. Ooh, I get a couple 4s. Inga and Simchu, I like that. Intense, creative. 2, 3, 5, 7, 3, 3, 9, 8, 8. 4 or 2 or 3. Maybe a 2 or an 8. I love it. No one thinks I'm a 1. That's interesting. Or a 6. I don't see any 6s. Well, here is the big reveal, my dear colleagues across the world. No idea. Thanks, Scott. Scott, you win the prize. Actually, my main type is type 3. And I'm a self-preserving type 3. And some of you are very happy that you guessed right. Well done, you. And so when we go back to the lens and the dynamic, and this has been just such a learning for me as a supervisor, is I feel the pressure when I'm leading coaching supervision groups to create value, to make sure it goes well, that people bring cases and we work cases and they have these great insights, because I'm trying to create value as a type 3 and make sure I'm contributing. And I have to relax that, because I know sometimes it's just about the relationship in the container. And one of the groups I was supervising, I was frustrated because the group had been together about a year. There was a social 3 in the group who was very committed to looking good. And so she never brought any cases, and she would always ask these questions that took us into the intellectual side of the work, but she never said, I'm struggling with a client. And one time in the year, she brought a case forward, and it wasn't a really robust challenge, but I was so happy she brought the case forward. And at the end of it, people weighed in and gave her some really useful ways to think about her scenario, and we processed that. At the end, she said, I hate this. I will never bring another case forward because it feels too exposing. And of course, as a type 3, she was really wanting to look good. And as a 3 supervisor, I'm thinking, what did I do or not do, taking full responsibility of the group dynamic, that contributed this, because I didn't create value for her. And so it's just fun to look at all of the different levels through the lens of the Enneagram. So is it Gerardo? Is that how you say your name? And I may not have the name correct. Are we sharing yours
Yes.
or ours? What do you mean
Like
by
a projection, maybe, you know?
Ah, yeah, that's great. Thank you. I do get that when I ask people, when I work with them, say, what do you think my Enneagram type is? A lot of times the 9s will say, you must be a 9. And the 5s will say, you must be a 5. So I take that as a compliment, but maybe they feel some symmetry in Michael saying there's just no way. So thanks for that. Alex, is there any correlation between types and culture? Between types and culture? In different cultures, the different types can look different. Okay, but the thinking is that if we took the world at large, there would be approximately an even distribution across all 9 types in the personalities. There are gender differences in the types that we have seen. So thanks for that. Any other questions before I'll talk a little bit about what else I use this in supervision, and then I can do a really quick splash of the 9 types if anyone's interested. And I also want to make sure to leave time for any questions that we have. The Enneagram does give us a picture of how we act, think, and feel. And so for those of you saying, I identify with more than one of these types or numbers, you will. You will perhaps identify with all 9. However, the construct that I have bought into and work with will say that there's a primary action type between 8, 9, and 1, and all of us will have a preference of how we act. All of us will have a preference in how we build relationships and connect through feelings, and that's the 2, 3, 4 numbers. And all of us will have a thinking preference, and those are the 5, 6, 7 numbers. And so when we get one of each of those, a number between 8, 9, and 1, how I'm going to act, a number between 2, 3, and 4, how I build positive relationship, and a number between 5, 6, and 7, how I'm likely going to think, that ends up being a tri-type. And if you have taken the integrative Enneagram assessment or want to, I'll just point this out on page 14. You see this funny little grid that looks like a Rubik's Cube. If you were to overlay these type numbers across the grid, you would see what your tri-type preferences are. So in that first row that's got a little finger, that's the symbol for body or acting. If you are in this column, you're a 1. If you're in the middle column, you're a 9. If you're in this column, you're an 8, and so forth. So take a screenshot, or I'll make sure that you have access to this, but this forms a tri-type. And what I do then with my groups is I share my tri-type and everyone shares their tri-type. This is an actual group that I lead. And so here I am with a self-preservation 3 as my main type. My thinking preference is big picture possibility thinking. And my acting preference is I want to get stuff done. I want to move things along. Come on, let's go. I'm happy to lead. I'm happy to step in if somebody needs it. So that's me as the supervisor of this group. And you can see what the rest of the group's profiles are. And what's fascinating, and the more you learn about the Enneagram, I can tell you that this dynamic absolutely plays out. We are a type 7 team. Everyone's having fun and thinking big pictures. And this particular coaching supervision group said, hey, can we bring in this resource and do watercolor painting on Zoom and just have fun together? And so they did, completely outside of coaching supervision. They had fun together because this group is about having fun. And so this becomes our tri-type, and it really shows up. So here's a few things that I do in supervision. I invite my supervision groups, because I do use Zoom as the platform, to rename themselves. And I'm going to do this right now. Everyone puts their tri-type by their name. And we're not trying to use the Enneagram to box us in. We're trying to use the Enneagram to see how small I've made my box. Because if my habituated response is I want to look good, I want to achieve a lot, I want to perform, it's actually making my own box smaller. And so as soon as I'm aware of that, I get more choices. And so we do, and I invite my groups to rename themselves in the name field so that we can see, where am I starting from? What is my likely action, feeling, and thinking preference? We share personal histories when we are forming groups. And if you're not familiar with Patrick Lencioni, these are his questions. I don't take credit for them, but I invite groups as they come together. And this is a great thing to do with teams and clients. Where'd you grow up? Where are you in the birth order? And what uniquely defined your childhood? And we'll usually hear the early threads of the Enneagram in that third question, or even the second question. If I grew up the oldest of 10 siblings and my mother died when I was 6, I am probably going to have a personality that is about caretaking or taking responsibility for my younger siblings, and it's going to start showing up. We do share cases using the client's Enneagram information. And then we start paying attention to all the way the patterns are showing up, even in the group dynamics. And it just gives us a shortcut language. So I have talked a lot. I know we've got 9 minutes left. I get very excited about this topic, and there are so many more things I could share, but let me pause and say what's most interesting to you right now that you would want to make sure that we cover in our remaining time. What are you curious about?
How our biases show up in coaching or coaching supervision.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, was that a question or a statement?
Oh, no, that's a statement. I'm well aware of it. So.
Yeah, and I'm just curious if you could say 1 or 2 sentences more, because it is true for us, right? And one of the things I'm always wondering is, what are we aware of in terms of how this shows up? And Michael, it sounds like you have some familiarity or experience with identifying with the type 5 quiet specialist or that deep thinker. How does it influence you?
It influences me in automatically I'm very much objective in what is showing up. And so my professor called me Neo because I see everything in patterns. So everything's coming to me as data points. The clothes you're wearing, the expression, how you're talking about what you're talking about, the choice of words, if you're interrupting yourself, what's going, all these things are just filtering through me, and I'm just processing. And that helps influence the next question or reflection that I give back to my clients.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And I have to be careful not to be too quick off the mark to do that, because it can be quite overpowering if I get them in one. Damien's seen me do this a couple of times where I've been, whoa, too direct, because I get it and, bam, it comes out.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that, Scott, you're asking a question, doesn't everyone do that? Some just more intuitively. That's a big difference. Am I processing through feelings? Am I processing through data and observations? And these are very different ways that we take in information, and Enneagram types will do this a little differently. So I really appreciate that, Michael. Thank you for that.
There are a couple of questions. I don't know if you see that in the...
Yeah, and I'm trying to catch up. So how do we learn agility to coach and supervise people very different from us? Scott, I think that's part of the heart of the value of, I think, this particular construct from my experience is, as soon as I can understand myself, understand you, understand we're coming from different places, all of a sudden I have a lot more compassion. And instead of judging, I actually have more ability to be with clients differently. So I think that is at the heart of what we all are doing as coaching and supervising. So it's a great question. Yeah, Larissa, just put your email address in chat, and I'll make sure I can set you up for the assessment.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Peter, say more, the map territory confusion. Say a little bit more about that.
I just, every time I come back to the Enneagram, it seems like it's an arbitrary cookie cutter division of human being into 9 elements or 9 types, and there's a tendency to start seeing people through the map rather than seeing people and finding the map from the people.
Yeah, beautiful. It's absolutely. I do think it's one of the dangers when people like myself have a lot of exposure to this, to say, because you're a 6, therefore, and we explain someone. And I do think we can be minimalistic if we're not careful about that, to say this is a language, but it's not meant to define and limit. So I think it's a really good point, Peter. Thank you.
And I was thinking about that, Kathleen, for example, with Michael's comment, like I'm familiar with the Enneagram, but I don't remember the name type, so I cannot know where people fall. But if you're in a group and you know what the other people's are, that may help you to understand them better. So when Michael said that, oh, that makes sense. So now I can understand him better, be more supportive, well, how does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's very likely, in understanding your Enneagram type, Damien, you process information very differently. And so if I even know that, then I'll say, that's how Michael processes information, different than how I process. How can I support him in that? And not judge because it is different from my own. Yeah, thank you for that. So in our couple minutes remaining, and thanks for giving me your email addresses. I will set you up. If I don't do it yet tonight, because it is getting later my time, you'll get a link tomorrow for those of you putting your email in. And Damien, I'm going to toss it over to you to ask or say anything. And I'm going to try to grab the screenshot that I've got that has the gender distribution, because it is pretty interesting. And if I can't come up with it quickly, we can always send it out.
Okay, I mean, while you do that, definitely was a lot of interest. This is one of the sessions better attended in this network since we started in the last 2 years. So that's means that maybe there is more interest in continuing the conversation. So maybe we can have a follow-up session later in the year when people get the results and we can come back and follow up. And maybe what can be interesting, doing maybe a demo with people who are interested in having like a group supervision demo using the Enneagram.
Would love it. Absolutely. And
I like that idea.
Yeah, and I'd love to, set time aside. If anyone wants to, we can do an hour and I can just walk through what do the results mean in the report if anyone does take that. This is the kind of current integrative Enneagram data set broken out by gender and type. So you can see the types here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Pink is women, blue are men. And the percentages of what percentage of the database are these type representations. So the most types in the database are type 7, 18%. The least represented types in this database are 4% of the type 4s, not many more type 5s or 6s. And you can see the gender splits. There are myths that we have that there will be more men than women who are type 8 active controllers. And in fact, this particular data set is evenly distributed. There are just as many 8 women who want to take control and lead and are comfortable in that as there are men. So happy to share this slide as well. And I know we're out of time. I'm happy to stay on the line for a few minutes. It's been lovely to be with all of you and look forward to continuing the conversation.
So, Kathleen, thank you very much for the session. What would be helpful is if you want to put your information in the chat room. So if anybody wants to reach to you, if you want to have an individual session or participate in one of your groups, or want to be in touch with you, and that's a good way to be in touch with you. And we may follow up, if you're okay with it, with a session later in the year.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And Kathleen is going to stay here for a couple of more minutes. I know it's a little bit late for some people.
I'm happy to. Yeah, thank you. And thanks everyone for being with us tonight.
And next month, we are going to have Janelle Beer from Paris and Andrea from Japan. They're going to be doing the same session that they have done for the Americas Coaching Supervision Network on the kind of thing. That session also got a lot of interest from people, how to use that model in organizations, in coaching, and particularly in uncertainty times. So if you can make it, I think it's going to be a very interesting session. It's going to be, it's always the last Tuesday in the United States, Wednesday morning in Asia, and a different country. We're going to keep the time. We're going to change the time for the people in the US and Canada. It's going to be 1 hour later. Okay, so remember that, and in Europe too. So we keep the same times in Asia and we change everybody else because this is the Asian network. So we need to accommodate to people in Asia. So thank you for everybody being here today and participating, and look forward to seeing you next month. And by the way, if you're not aware, we have a coaching supervision conference coming up at the end of April. So if you want to know more details, let me know. And if you don't receive invitation for this network, please let me know so I can add your name to the list, because we have a mailing list for this network. So if you are not in that mailing list and you want to get an invitation every month, please let me know so I can add your name to the mailing list. Okay, send me an email and I will do that.
Is it okay to ask a question?
Yes, so now we're finishing formally. I'm going to stop the recording.